Order. Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. Minister, her time has expired.
Mr Speaker,
the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I'm going to slightly divert at the start from what I was going to say to answer the allegations that the Honourable Anne Tolley has made with regard to the role of the police in this matter. The police got it wrong. The police have accepted they got it wrong. David Carruthers is investigating it. And, Mr Speaker, the Minister of Police has got to stop defending the indefensible. There's not a general criticism of the police, but I think there is a specific criticism in this case. They didn't do what they should have done where there is a marginal case of this sort, as they thought, and they didn't refer it to the Crown Law Office in the way that was appropriate, the way that would have been an appropriate protection for them. But, Mr Speaker, that matter is now being investigated by David Carruthers. I do want to make some comments about John Banks and say, frankly, I've found over the years John Banks to be a mixed bag. When in the mid-1980s, when I was advocating for homosexual law reform, there was not one more rabid person in the House on that issue than John Banks. He was absolutely awful. He was shocking, he was rude, he was obscene, he was offensive in this House and outside the House. Mr Speaker, but what I want to say is that over the years after that, he grew. He began to understand the issues. He began to have some compassion and understanding in the area, to the point where he voted for the marriage equality legislation last year. And I just want to say that I admire him. You know, it's sometimes easier for us who have generally been liberal on issues to stay being liberal than it is for people who have had deep convictions to move from those convictions to what he considered in the end was a point of principle. I also want to say that I very much appreciate the leadership he's taken in the last year or so around the awful legislation that the Honourable Peter Dunn was in charge of around legal highs. And in particular, the leadership he's taken with regard to the position of animals being experimented on. I think without his support, we would not have been able to make the changes that we have, and I want to acknowledge Mr Banks for that and to say thank you. I also want to say that his judgment has never been brilliant, and in this particular area, he made a very fundamental error in that he trusted Michelle Bogue. Michelle Bogue designed for him a system to cut donations into 25k chunks and thereby pretend that they were anonymous. I mean, the .com one is one where there has been a lot of publicity about it, but those weren't the only two 25k cheques that were donated into this campaign. That system was designed by a fundraiser with enormous experience of fundraising for the National Party and hiding that money, Michelle Bogue. And, Mr Speaker, one of the questions which I think the David Carruthers and other people who are reviewing this case should look at is whether a case should be reopened in this area, whether in fact Michelle Bogue is an accessory to John Banks's electoral fraud, whether she has herself committed a crime. And, Mr Speaker, that is something which I hope is covered in one of the reports that are going to be considered. I also say that while John Banks has moved from very conservative to quite liberal in a number of areas, I just think it is awful that he is leaving the ACT party to a leader who's promoting incest. I mean, it is just awful that, John Banks coming to a point of principle is leaving a party that will have dueling banjos as its theme tune for the next election. And I think the idea that a deal will be done whereby Paul Goldsmith continues not to run in Epsom, and the third failure, we've had Rodney Hyde, we've had John Banks, and we've got now a new Act person who I'm sure will be a failure as well in that area, and I think that is very sad. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I do want to make clear that I have an interest in this matter. Mr. Speaker, it was my letter of the 23rd of April 2012 to Bruce Thomas, who was the electoral officer at the Auckland Council, that kicked off the series of investigations into John Banks. The original complaint contrasted the comment from Sky City that they had donated to both campaigns with the fact that Mr. Banks did not declare. So back in April of 2012 I did that, 23rd, and followed it up on the 30th, because following the publicity around which flowed from my letter, the Kim.com made some public comments which I then added, and Mr. Thomas made a quick and a proper decision to refer the matter to the police. Mr. Speaker, the police, for reasons that I can't work out, decided that instead of getting one of their legal experts from head office, or one of their leading investigators from head office to deal with it, or even from Auckland, decided that they'd get a Canterbury police officer, a detective superintendent based in Christchurch, to investigate this matter. That to me was, I think, to say the least, surprising, and that Peter Reid, who was at the time the detective superintendent in Southern, was the person who was responsible for the egregious error in this case. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it is quite sad that occurred. And Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party won't force a by-election in the Epsom electorate. It's just not in the public interest to have someone elected to a parliament when the first time that they could come to the parliament would be after the parliament has dissolved. That is something which is just, it is silly, it is senseless, it would be a waste of taxpayers' money, and we won't support that. Mr. Speaker, what has come out of this, though, is a lot of focus on the manipulation of the system that is occurring on the part of the National Party with regard to MMP. And I just want to say to members opposite that in the end the public will get sick of it. They will get sick of the National Party saying it doesn't matter if Peter Dunn leaks state secrets, vote for him anyway, and doesn't matter in Epsom, and it appears that someone is sharpening the rusty screwdriver for Murray McCully so that he cuts his arm off, because that's what he said he would do before he gave up the seat to Colin Craig. Mr. Speaker, the point that I'll make is that I want to see people with an integrity, people like Kelvin Davis, who say they're not match fixers, they're not going to rort the system. When the Labour Party runs in a seat, they run in a seat. And they don't run in a seat and say, don't vote for me. But I will say, as a final comment, I hope that Holly Walker, when she comes to speak in Hutt South, says the party vote's the most important. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Christopher Finlinson.
I just want to take a brief call because